You are listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. Coming to you virtually live from high atop the historic Raleigh building in beautiful downtown Raleigh. The NCF&B takes the listener behind the scenes to tell the stories of the people that contribute to the creation of the food and beverage community of North Carolina. And now, the misfits in the dish pit, the faces of the front. They are Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss. And today in studio, we have a distinguished gentleman. You've heard of the most interesting man in the world. This is the most interesting man of beer. From his gait to his stature and everything.
Gate, yes.
But he also is, to validate, a 4-time James Beard Award semifinalist. He is the chief executive optimist, self-proclaimed, we'll find out today, of Fullsteam Brewery in Durham, North Carolina, Mr. Sean Lilly Wilson.
That's quite a lead-in. I hope to live up to all of that. Thank you for the kind introduction.
A distinct gait, as we heard, that people can find you from just the way you walk from across the way.
Or as my Instagram profile says on my @SeanLillyWilson, Our State Magazine said a tall, medium-built man.
Wow, that's kind of a backhanded.
Tall, medium built. What the heck does that mean?
That's how they describe
God, I hate to see what they describe me as. Because a tall wouldn't be
overbuilt man. No. Time to get in that gym, boys.
Yeah.
Sean, this is we've had you on the show just as a brief little pocket of a Terra Vita episode. You came in, you were, gracious enough to give us a little bit of time there. And it was like chaotic. There was so much happening all the time. This is what we've wanted for a long time, having you in studio to talk about what you do. As Matt and I were discussing before you came in, we got to talk about if you are in North Carolina or even just in the neighboring areas and are enjoying a delicious craft brew, then you should be saying thank you right now, and I'll give you a moment to say it, to Mr. Sean Lilly Wilson, because you, along with some other people that helped contribute to this, helped create what we know now as our modern beer industry, a craft brewing industry, with the Pop the Cap reform, and just all that you have done as a leader in the beer industry. So, everybody at once, say thank you.
We'll raise a glass together. That's very kind of you to say, and it really was a statewide effort with a lot of people leading it. I was maybe the rabble-rouser and kind of the communications person, but we couldn't have got this done without Julie Johnson, then Julie Bradford of All About Beer Magazine and the World Beer Festival, Erica Lamb here in Raleigh, kind of a quiet force, and our lobbyist Teresa Castrava, who continues to lobby. And really, like, we started this thing out, we thought it was going to be like maybe a petition would help make it happen, and we had a lot to learn, but it was a heck of a lot of fun, and what an interesting time now, like over 15 years ago.
Yes, that was in 2005, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Just so you understand, listeners, what that means is previous to 2005, North Carolina brewers were not allowed to brew any type of beer that exceeded in 6% alcohol.
That's right.
I believe.
That's
and
right.
I don't think you could buy a beer that was over 6% alcohol
Correct.
in the state.
Yeah, that was made in the state, right? Could you buy beer from other states?
No, that's why like Budweiser and everybody else, they had to actually adjust some of their brews, I think, for North Carolina.
I don't know how much adjusting there was versus just we're not going to sell in North Carolina because they have this law.
Mm-hmm.
I know in Utah they just literally last month or maybe 3 weeks ago just upgraded their laws because they've been kind of living in the dark there too. But you were allowed to buy cans of beer that exceeded 6%, but any beer on tap in Utah had to be sub 6%, maybe even sub 5%.
I think it has to be exactly 4% alcohol by weight. You learn all these weird laws and regulations in the process of studying and try to change the law in North Carolina. And so for 3 years, that was our effort, was to kind of understand why this law existed, which was just a remnant from Prohibition. It was basically that mill workers were concerned that workers would show up to work drunk on Mondays. That's the best we could understand the origin of the law.
Yeah.
And there was no restriction on wine, no restriction on spirits. I think it's because like beer is of the working class, beer is of the common person, whereas wine and spirits were of the moneyed, and they could change the legislation, but the sort of paternalistic mindset towards beer was what kept this law in place for 70 years, and it just was time to change.
Yeah, it was a relic.
Yeah.
But you changed it merely because you've been quoted as saying because you wanted to buy good beer when you went shopping for beer.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say I didn't change anything. The legislature and
rebel roused.
Yeah, that's right. That was my motivation. I did not think I would start up a brewery. I just was really at the time in love with like beers like Victory Storm King, and I wanted to not go to Virginia to have to buy this Imperial Stout. And we thought maybe we had to do a study on the projected amount of jobs we thought this law change would create.
Yeah.
And we were like, I don't know, after a little bit of research, we're like 300, and it's been really rewarding to see just how much the economy has shifted and how craft beer has been a big tourism component for North Carolina, and just the creative endeavors and the small business creation and kind of larger business creation that's come from this relic, getting rid of this relic.
Yeah. What did you think you were going to do before? I mean, you have an MBA from Duke and a Master's of Public Policy, so it's somewhat relatable to what you helped do with Pop the Cap. But what did you think you were going to do before you started a brewery?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I got those degrees and worked for a bunch of different startups and just really wasn't making it working for other small businesses, other entrepreneurial ventures.
Yeah.
And I sold myself short thinking that I was always going to be somebody who worked with or for other entrepreneurs, because I'm not an engineer, I'm not an inventor, I'm not a technologist. And I realized that my love of people and of service and of food and beverage was the idea. And so, like I wasn't really making it working for others, just startups, technology, nothing interesting. And basically it was like a slow building of confidence and like, I can do this. Wait, this beer could be, the market's going to change. Like things are going to start happening and I should really get into this. And then I had like kind of a personal consideration too, and you may know about this because I'm pretty chatty about it all. But around
it's been well
documented.
Yeah.
And so like shortly after the law change, I had been diagnosed with kidney disease, and my kidneys went into failure, and my wife ended up being a donor and a match and a donor for me. And it was basically around then I was like, look, if I'm ever going to do something, like let's make it happen. And so that's sort of where the name Fullsteam comes from and all that. But 5 years to the day of the lifting of the cap is when we launched Fullsteam.
Man, I literally just got chills from that story, because I personally am one of those people that probably feel similar to you in that like working for other people has its benefits, but man, if you could do it for yourself and just jump off the cliff and be the entrepreneur. And to some extent we've done that with this podcast, which has been a godsend. But nice. I think that's a like beautiful thing just for other people to think about. It's like because I know lots of people in this area in particular struggle from the same fear of, man, I want to start my own thing. But how do I do it? When do I do it? Why would I do it? And then boom, you just went forth and did it. But you also had quite the impetus to do it.
Yeah, for sure. It was a now or never. And one quote that you made me think of that was a big motivator for me was leap and the net will appear. And I'm still trying to figure out who the hell Annette is, but
well, she's not your wife, and that's pretty awesome too. That like your champion and your partner in life happened to also be a fit for you. I mean, I don't know how rare a kidney match is, but I imagine it's rare enough to not just be married randomly to the person always. And so that's a pretty awesome
She's an awesome person. I'm very,
Connection,
very
yeah.
lucky. It's more common than you think with modern medicine, but the fact that she was willing to do that for me, I mean, we wouldn't be talking today. I wouldn't have this opportunity if it weren't for her gift.
Talk about sacrifice. Yeah. Real quick, public service announcement. This is not sponsored by anyone, but the reason you were perfectly in good health, you had nothing to worry about. But I think if, as the story reads, the reason you went to it is because you responsibly decided, okay, we should get life insurance, which. That's my public service announcement. Nice. Everybody should get life insurance, especially if you have children. You went and you did it, and that's because of that checkup. You found out that something was wrong with your kidney.
Yeah, I had a diagnosis, just a routine. Nurse comes to the home, does a little checkup to make sure, for qualifying for life insurance. And needless to say, we didn't qualify for life insurance, but I found out some very important information that came at a critical time. The thing, not to get too deep, this isn't the kidney podcast. I realize that, but.
No, that's what it's called now.
We've actually rebranded.
We rebranded, yeah.
The thing about this particular disease or kidney function in general is you can have like 10% kidney function and not really know that your kidneys are failing. So a lot of these situations come last minute when things are really bad. I was fortunate enough to have it under control and kind of be on the lookout for when it went down significantly, which it did.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that also in our business, that kidney functioning is very important because it's the stuff that helps to clean out the liquor. So,
right. Yeah.
Seriously. The irony of somebody that owns a brewery and makes a living with that having a kidney problem is.
Yeah, it does keep it in check for me for sure. And there's so many ironies with where I'm at running a brewery. I went to a very conservative evangelical Christian college undergraduate. That's where Carolyn, my wife, and I met. And you couldn't drink, you couldn't dance, you couldn't play cards. It was
like Footloose.
Basically. It was in the Midwest. Yeah, it was all those things. And so like my little joke is that I'll never be on the alumni magazine there. Like cover of the alumni magazine. So there's a lot of.
They must be really ashamed of you.
I think they are. They're not the only ones. But notable alum of Wheaton College include Billy Graham, which might not be a surprise.
Famous North Carolinian.
Wes Craven.
Of horror movie fan. Yeah. That's interesting and quite a range of characters.
You basically turn out one way or the other at Wheaton College.
Well, I would like to ask you to pop the cap.
Hey,
see what I did there?
Nice.
Of something that you've brought in just because, well, you have a brewery as we discussed. It's self-serving. I wanted you to pop the cap because I wanted to celebrate with Matt, and since you're here, Sean. All three of us can celebrate 3 years of doing this podcast.
Congratulations.
Woo! It was December 1st when we finally released our first episode in 2019. And that was, we actually did a 6-pack of releases because Matt and I had been recording for about 5-6 weeks. Everybody, go right ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was going to do a little sound effect for it. I don't know if it'll work, but.
That sounded great.
That sounded great. And so, just if anybody cares to know, if you listen to the very first episode with Hai Tran, who, it's funny how it worked out, but Hai Tran's birthday is December 1st. And so that's always kind of interesting that he's our, number one guest on our anniversary, and it happens to be his birthday too. So happy birthday to Hai Tran as well as
Hai Tran.
Happy three years to Matt and I doing this. The actual first episode is of Matt Weiss, of me recording you, Matt. I interview you, which is technically episode 2, and then technical episode 3 is you interviewing me.
Yeah.
So that anybody is like, who the hell are these jokers? Like, why should we be listening to this? So if you ever want to really hear the beginning, it's pretty raw. It's pretty rough. And it was in our basement, and we just got started. But cheers to doing this show, because I think it's kind of taken on its own little life, and I think people understand that knowing the stories of North Carolina's food and beverage culture are important and interesting, and it's kind of nice to catalog what we've done here, along with everybody else that's doing it, but being a part of this whole industry.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
So, what are we
This is a little Brett Lager. It's only at our tavern, so we pop open. We had it on draft. Now we just have bottles, but it's just a simple little dry Brettanomyces lager. Wanted to kind of start things off with a subtle, Brett-based, easy-drinking, dry farmhouse ale.
Yeah, that is delicious. It's got a long finish to it as well. This, This would exceed 6% alcohol, I assume.
What does it say there?
6.9.
Just over 6. Yeah.
So this was an illegal beer back low 15 years ago.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're tearing things up right here from just one sip. We had, not to harken too back to the days, but the rhetoric back in the era of Pop the Cap was fantastic. Just the things that the legislators would say, those opposed to the law change, and you'd hear things like, one of these beers is like drinking straight vodka, and we just would take these inane quotes and turn them into T-shirts that people would buy and sport to raise money to pay for our lobby.
Yeah, vodka was allowed to be sold in the state.
Everclear.
Yeah.
You could get Everclear at a state-run liquor store, but you couldn't get this beer.
Yeah, that was the whole thing. Those archaic laws cracked me up. I know in Santa Monica, they had these old beach laws about what you could wear. And apparently they hadn't changed the rule since like 1937 when they had made an actual law about the way women can expose their bodies on the beach. And just through the 60s and the swinging 60s and people are doing whatever they want and bare midriffs and bikinis, they technically were breaking the law every time a woman wore a two-piece in Santa Monica. And even more so as the 80s, the back of the bikini started to get smaller and smaller. Apparently the law stated they had to change it, but it stated that a woman's buttocks had to be 5/6 clothed back in the day.
Wow.
So I don't know who was going around with a protractor and measuring butts, but with clothing. But that was a real law, and I guess one woman decided to get arrested, she called it on herself to show the stupidity of this law. She's like, I'm wearing a bikini, I'm breaking the law, arrest me so we can change this law. Nice. I don't know who that champion was, but I appreciate her.
Thank you very much for showing more 5/6.
All it took was 1 or 2 sips of beer, right? And we're just getting chatty.
Brett Lager makes it happen.
So let's talk about the brain trust behind Fullsteam. So, do you conceptually come up with the beers and kind of what you want to do, and then name them, and then you have a brewer, and how does it work?
Well, that's a complicated answer. I'll start with kind of the basics. So Eric Myers is our director of brewery operations. Mm-hmm. He ran, as you may know, Mystery Brewing, former president of the North Carolina Craft Brewers Guild, author of a couple of books and all that. So he, a couple of years ago, maybe a little over a year ago, Mystery closed, and we were in need of a head brewer, and he's been serving in that capacity. So he's the recipe, ideation. I'll contribute for sure. But he's the one who makes it all happen. And then, naming and branding and all of that, I'm sort of the visionary behind it, but increasingly, as we are now a 9-year-old brewery, it's important for me to turn over elements of that and let other people exercise that skill set and kind of take Fullsteam into new chapters. So, some of the names are it's kind of like look around. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like Brett Lager, that's a great example. Like we just couldn't come up with a name. We're like, just call it Brett Lager. Like it is what it is. Yeah. But a beer like First Frost, a long time now, beer that's been part of our repertoire for a decade. Based on foraged persimmons and the sort of the lore of persimmons being ready after the first frost. I mean, that kind of comes from my brain, and probably should back up and say, basically Fullsteam exists because we want to build on my experience and my love for creating economy out of beer. So Pop the Cap was really about a new era of opportunity for breweries, for retailers, for distributors, restaurants in craft beer. And there was an economic boon that came from that. And I wanted to explore what it meant to be a Southern brewery and to take that and extend that to farmers, foragers, and agricultural entrepreneurs. So First Frost is a good example of that in that we pay our foragers a market rate for foraging persimmons for us. So early on, we tried to get a trade going, bring us persimmons and we'll give you beer. And it was just always out of whack. It was always confusing. I think people thought that they were going to get these 1 wagonfuls of I don't know why I went with wagons. We haven't been around that long. Wagonfuls of beer.
What about this truck? No, wagon. We need wagons.
But cash is the great equalizer, and so we pay like $3 a pound for persimmons, and that's from our very first beer that we brewed, which was our Southern Basil Farmhouse Ale, where we used local wheat and local basil. We've been really on this passion for extending this concept of economic opportunity from the Pop the Cap era to our what we call the Southern beer economy, buying local to encourage economic opportunity in beer for farmers and again agricultural entrepreneurs in like this post-tobacco South.
We'll take a quick break just to discuss the Folk Foundation. Folks Foundation is a new sponsor of our podcast. They are champions of all good things that are crafted in North Carolina and the folks that make them. So we're talking about products, we're talking about art, we're talking about music, we're talking about podcasts. Anything that is created independently in our state, you can find out information from, because the Folks Foundation also has the Journal, which is essentially a magazine that's both in print and online. And they are a membership-driven team. So you can sign up to become a member at Folks Foundation. As a member, you're directly supporting makers, growers, crafters, and artisans of North Carolina. The benefits of championing the handcrafted culture in our state directly affects the lives of us all every day. From local products that we eat and put in our bodies, to the music and the podcasts we listen to on our daily commutes. So membership packages vary, but they all would at least include the Folks Journal and discounts to their general store and access to exclusive content. Visit them at folksfoundation.org. That's folksfoundation.org, or click the link in our show notes.
Great.
And so that's also probably like that political awareness. Not that it's not good as good food, but one of the reasons, because the First Frost won a Good Food Award, is that right?
Yeah.
In 2013?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Done your research. Excellent.
Let's try it.
Okay, cool. This is the original one that won in 2013, and then the Brandy Barrel version won in 2016. And this is this year's release here.
So the Good Food Awards, we've actually been fortunate enough to have many local North Carolina producers win Good Food Awards. I know, like, straight off the top of my head, Craig over at Crude Bitters
The Dairy, Escazoo, Big Spoon, so many cheesemakers.
Which is pretty awesome, which, again, goes back to why there are great stories to tell about North Carolina food and beverage, that everyone's doing a considerable job. And now I wonder, like, talk about, like, you know, the secrets out about things that are happening not just in North Carolina, but even specific to like the Triangle. There's so much happening. Maybe now when the nominees come out for any type of thing like a James Beard or a Good Food Award, maybe now we just like get brought to the top as a state. Like, well, let's go see what North Carolina's doing, because we've established that there is a quality level here, which is great. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I like your thinking there, and I think we're seeing that play out in the beer world, where we're in that cusp of the top 10 when talked about in terms of like great beer states, and or maybe we're well into it now as we see a range from the very small breweries to the massive expansions of Sierra Nevada and Oscar Blues and New Belgium. Yeah, we obviously, I mean, this is why we're chatting here, right? There's no shortage of content for great food and beverage, and I think the Good Food Awards, it's not very well known in the beer spheres. It's not as recognized as the more broader food and beverage community, and I wish it were. But certainly we're always doing very well in North Carolina with finalists and winners.
Is the Good Food Award, just pardon my ignorance, but isn't it more like CPG, right? It's like consumer packaged good products. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Like so, yeah. It's not like a restaurant wouldn't be up there, but if a restaurant made a sauce or something like that.
That's right.
So obviously, beer is packaged in various capacities, and so that's why it qualifies, and that's why the bitters and the peanut butter and the chocolate we talked about are all part of that. So yeah, I believe the awards are held in San Francisco every year.
Are. Yeah.
And so you've been to a few, and you've been a winner, which is pretty amazing.
Gone to a few. We won in 2018. We won 3. You can submit 3 beers, and we won for all 3 beers that year. And no breweries ever won 3 Good Food Awards in a single year. So that was a big moment. And our then brewer, Brian Mandeville, who's now at Fine Creek in Virginia, it was really cool to see him walk up and have none other than Alice Waters don the award and put it over awards and put it over his head. That was really cool.
That's amazing. So what are you going to submit this year?
Well, we submitted 3, and we got a finalist nod for 1. We can pop that open in a little bit here. That's a collaboration with Scratch Brewing out of Ava, Illinois. We just called this beer Ava, and this is the barrel-aged version, wine barrel-aged version. That's an entirely local beer, from the local grain bill to foraged elderflower and wild grape leaves, and it's a mixed culture with our house yeast, so it was a really neat project. Subtle, but very delicate and enjoyable. I was actually listening to y'all's Thanksgiving episode, and beer didn't make an appearance there.
We said cider, but we did not say beer.
And cider makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But I thought, you know what? I know it's after the holidays or after the Thanksgiving holiday, but that Brett Lager and certainly the barrel aged Ava, I think these are beers that we had on our Thanksgiving table and deserve a place as well.
You know what? And I want to ask a question about that Brett Lager and also this new collaboration that you're submitting. But I can tell you one place where you can likely get these beers, and if you can't get them, then tell Chris and Glenn to get them because they will get them for you. But that's trianglewinecompany.com.
Just seamless every time. Just seamless right in there.
Yeah.
Well, they make it easy for us, and they make it easy for you. They have 4 locations. So 1 in Southern Pines, if you're out there, Holly Springs, my backyard, Morrisville, and then their flagship location right next to the Whole Foods in Cary on Waverly Place, trianglewineco.com for all your beverage needs. They will deliver to you. And Max, if you want to maybe save some money in this busy holiday season, what do you got to do?
Use the NCFB promo code when you shop either online or in person. Just look at them dead in the eye and say NCFB. And then they'll look at you weird and then say it again. And then they won't know what you're saying. And then you just say, look, there's a podcast with these 2 guys. And you guys here at Triangle Wine Company sponsor it. So there's a discount. You will have to have this interaction. But
you will get your discount.
It will be very valuable, at least 10% off valuable, which is great because then you can also get Fullsteam out there and you can get Proof Alcohol Ice Cream. We'll talk about them at the end of the episode, but I always like to give a quick mention because they're awesome.
Let's get back to these because we didn't even talk about the Brett Lager, and I absolutely love that. And I know lagers are the big next thing, the old thing that's new again.
So hot right now.
You said one thing though that I was confused with. You said something about the Brett Lager and then described it as a farmhouse ale.
Well, it's got that kind of farmhousey finish. It's a little style agnostic. It's right, yeah, for sure. It's a lager, a farmhouse ale, right? It kind of floats in between, and we just kind of went with Brett Lager. It's Brettanomyces based. And lagered, so it's a true lager, but it's got that dryness of a farmhouse beer.
And most lagers you're going to expect to be low ABV and probably a little bit more simple, just on the flavor profile. And this is not that. This is pretty intense, and it's high ABV and.
But finish is dry, yeah. So there's a lot going on for sure in it. And though lagers, very true that they tend to be just as you described, lower in alcohol, easy drinking, crushable. But there are some odd exceptions, particularly Baltic Porter, which is a lager, a darker beer, a Doppelbock. Like a lot of these rules, there's exceptions to them, and yeah.
Well, I'm marveled about your place in this industry, Sean, and I just you're essentially not a brewer. You're not. You said it earlier, you're not the engineer to do these things. You're not a lot of these things, but yet you are a piece of the puzzle that many businesses don't understand that they need until they realize they're kind of floundering. And it's you are the visionary, as you said, but you see where you're going to go. And even before you opened up Fullsteam. And I think that's kind of what Matt was echoing too. It's you could have done a lot of different things. You have a great education, and it kind of led you to be able to do a lot. But what you're really doing is just being a champion. Like, you are a champion for your own beer, but a champion for beer in general in the state and worldwide or nationally, but also of like human rights and looking out for your fellow person, which I've always respected and been very aware of since I've met you. I'm like, that guy just lives his life right and is like conscious about his fellow person. And I truly appreciate that.
Thank you.
I just want to say it because I don't know if people always know that about Sean Lilly Wilson, that like you do a lot, not just for the brewery scene, but kind of encapsulates a lot.
Thanks. That means a lot. I really appreciate that.
No, but it should be said. You also have been, we talked with the James Beard Awards, you've been nominated 4 times for Outstanding Beer Spirits. It's the beverage category, and that's a national award, similar to, say, how Ashley won that award as a chef. That's the national award. That's going against everybody. It's not regional. And so with that, it's a huge and very competitive category to be nominated. 4 times, is that correct?
That's right.
12, 13, 18, 19? Am I right?
That's right.
Okay, so you just came off a back-to-back nomination, and that in itself too, like, it's pretty awesome. And I just gave you all this,
Are you setting me up only to tear me down? I'm ready. Bring it on. What's happening here?
But I really want to take you to task.
What is it that you do?
I mean, what the hell?
No, but it's great. Like, you are not you're not doing these specific things, but you are the catalyst to put it all together. And so by getting nominated, and heck, if you actually won this award, either way, being nominated many times, it's not cliche to say that it is like a win just to be nominated. But being recognized, especially for being the one that doesn't make the actual beer, is what I'm saying. Is like, it really proves to show how integral and important you are, not only to your own business, but to the community. And it's being recognized by the community as well. So that was the point, I guess, I was trying to make.
I know, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate it. The only thing that I can do is to say that it's obviously super amazing to get the recognition, the nod. But I'm only able to do this because of the people who do the work, right? The actual brewer, the actual packaging people, the team behind it all, and I've had a couple of ideas in my life, right? Like, hey, let's change this alcohol law, and hey, let's focus on making distinctly Southern beer, and I'm proud of those things. But really, the credit goes to the people who make it happen, and I'm the guy who gets to pop open a couple of the realizations of their hard work here in studio with you.
But being recognized over many years and different members of your team have come and gone too shows that the consistency is you. Like, you're the driving force. He's less Belichickian and more Joe Gibbsian. Because Joe Gibbs, only quarterback or only coach to successfully win 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks, and no one has that connotation. Meaning, it was about the coach. The coach was the guy that put the people in their place. So enough. I'll get off the high horse of
keep going.
Well, no. What I want to know is, because you are so hyper conscious about what's going on in the social movements. What is your next project? I mean, obviously,
I know.
You do? Because I have no idea.
Well, you're talking
Well,
about.
you're going to open up box.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that thing that I just told the whole community about. You're opening up another branch of Fullsteam in RTP, an untapped resource, my friends.
Can we talk about this? Is this like for public consumption?
They did say it in public.
Yeah, so Boxyard in RTP, they've had Boxyard had their big kind of debut and an official unveiling in the fall. Right. So it's all out there with more work to be done, and certainly some more announcements for this multi-tenant shipping container project. And I like, Max, what you said about an untapped area, because 10 years ago, that's exactly what the warehouse district of downtown Durham was.
Right.
Now we're across from Motorco, next to the Pit. We've got Coco Cinnamon, Surf Club, Accordion Club, Luella's. It's a great...
Now somebody just needs to put a parking lot there.
Yeah. Okay.
The trials and tribulations of an outside salesman.
Right. True. And so that we heard similar similar refrains of like, there's nothing there. Why would you go there a decade ago?
Right.
And of course, we've seen a great flourishing in that area of Durham. And now this is another area of Durham. People might not realize that Research Triangle Park is actually Durham. And so we're staying in town, if you will, in another area that's got a lot of untapped potential.
Yeah.
Research Triangle Park's charter meant that the campus could not have retail. It was sort of disallowed in its original charter, and they've modified, the foundation has modified that to allow for retail, and this is their first planned retail venture, with more to come.
This is going to be such a, first of all, so cool, but it's really going to change the game for all those people that work in RTP, and then they have to commute, and there's nowhere to go, and now there's a reason to like stay around work, I guess, or kind of have your happy hours or get there early. I mean, I'm sure many ideas about this whole creation of this beyond my imagination.
There are things that I am not privy to talk about, but I can at least say there are lots of things happening in RTP that are coming soon.
Yeah.
And that's what's really cool. You are going to see, listeners, a totally different RTP because of the law or because of that kind of loophole that had been changed or so. It's like you popped the cap on RTP in effect. But it makes sense. I mean, right now there are tens of thousands of employees that do tech work. It's basically like Silicon Valley of the East, although someone told me that it existed before the Silicon Valley, so it's really like the Silicon Valley of it is the Silicon Valley. It only makes sense to put something cool like a brewery out there. So for Fullsteam's segment there, it's going to essentially be just a tap room. Is that correct?
It'll just be a tap room there. But what I'm really looking forward to is the community component of it. So these large employers, they started, be it Glaxo or IBM or Research Triangle Institute, they certainly have great food on site. The sort of campus cooking, like we all think of SAS and how great the work-life benefits are there and all, but kind of these businesses came to be in a different era at a time where it was like drive in, work, have your lunch on site, work more, go home. And now, that's why downtown Raleigh is thriving, downtown Durham. We want that sort of live, work, play. And there's no real kind of community place to hang out in RTP. And as the area grows and traffic sucks and people want to actually live in that area near their work, I think there's a cool opportunity to work with other food and beverage professionals, some of whom have been announced and others down the road that I'm super excited about, and being a part of a mini campus in repurposed shipping containers. That's going to be a lot of fun, Yeah.
We're going to take a quick pause for a new sponsor that just came on to the podcast, and we'll be right back. So let's take a quick break from today's show to talk about our new sponsor on the podcast. It's the Butcher's Market. They are expanding. They're growing their company. They're opening up a new place in the Bedford community of North Raleigh off of Falls of Neuse and Dunn Road. The cool part about that, though, is with that expansion means that they're going to be looking for new people. So maybe you're already a butcher, but more importantly, maybe this is something that has always inspired you and thought, man, that is so fascinating. Well, this would be a really cool place to start because as we discussed with them, you don't even need to really know how to be a butcher. You just need to know how to be a good person. So do you know how to be a good person? If you can hear me and you're a good person and you are inspired to want to know more about the culinary arts in the butcher's realm, this is a good place to start. So for more information, go to thebutchersmarkets.com. That's butchersmarkets.com. Remember, the Butcher's Markets. They're your neighborhood butcher and specialty grocer, providing our guests with premium meats, local products, and excellent hospitality every day. All right, and we're back, and Sean is pouring. What are we drinking now?
This is the barrel-aged Ava that I mentioned. This is the finalist and possible winner of a Good Food Award for 2020. We'll find out soon. And
that happens in January, right?
That's right. Yeah, the official announcement. And this is the collaboration with Scratch Brewing out of Ava, Illinois. So one thing that we dabble in foraged beers. We love foraging. I personally, it's how I connect with the land. And Scratch, this is what they do. They forage and like that they're hardcore into it, and while it's an element of what we do when we our forage beers, when they're mixed culture, we call them the Farm's Edge. We put them in the Farm's Edge series, and this is a collaboration with Scratch. They came out, we went foraging, we made a beer.
I'm sorry, what did you forage for? What are you?
In this instance, we foraged for. They came out in like summer, so it was a kind of a challenging time. We got elderflower, early summer, elderflower and wild grape leaves.
Oh, that's right. Why did you decide to do a collaboration specifically with them? Did you know somebody, or did they have some history here?
Well, the brewers that forage is sort of a smaller but growing audience, and a mutual friend of ours, Jed Portman, formerly of Garden and Gun magazine, a dear friend of mine, was one of the connecting forces and all of that, and kind of introductions a couple of years ago, and Brian, our brewer, when we made this beer, had formed that deeper relationship with them. And Scratch is just a great brewery. If you ever get a chance to go to the central Illinois, between them and 17th Street Barbecue, it's a great place to.
Are these guys like in the middle of nowhere too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
basically.
I've heard actually. Greg, who's the new brewer at Y Hill, was talking them up like wild.
He made a forage beer.
He did.
Yeah. I had it. It was really good.
That's right.
See, this is like what we're talking about, like this Southern beer economy. Can I just mention
Please.
this real quick?
Yeah.
Like when we first brewed a forage beer, I think First Frost was probably the first Southern forage beer made with forage persimmons. We got a lot of shit for it. We just got a lot of heat for this sort of like.
What would be the heat, or why would they?
It seems weird to talk about, but just like 10 years ago, like the off kind of thrown around meaningless like hipster this and that, like it's just this hipster thing to do, right? And it's like I think that word just means I don't yet understand it. Right. I'll eventually get there, but I don't understand it right now.
Yeah.
I just kind of
Is that
made
because
that
you're
up,
not
but
like,
I'm going to stick with
No,
that.
But are
can
you
see
saying
that.
this because foraging doesn't fall inside of the the guidelines of like farming and paying a farmer and like I don't know, just because we're
different.
going out into the wild and just finding it and using it.
It's just different. It's just
Yeah.
weirdos like me that are attracted to it, and
I think what I took away from what Sean was saying there is more like, it's weird. Like, it's like not only hipster, but like hippy dippy crap. You're going out into the woods and putting stuff in my beer. Just make my beer with the hops and the yeast. And right.
Yeah.
There's that element, or. Oh man, I could go down a rabbit hole on innovation. Like I brought a hazy beer, just because like that's what's hot right now.
Yeah. Sure.
But it like a question to you is hazy beer, hazy IPAs, is that innovative?
I mean, it doesn't seem so anymore because everyone's doing it, but I don't know, maybe
but
2 years ago.
But they sell, and that's what people want, and it's like what's really regarded, and it's what's popular and all that. But
so
arguably,
Chardonnay,
Well,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that's
super oaky Chardonnay, even.
Well, hazy IPAs are the super oaky Chardonnay of beer,
right?
And I mean, but I drink them down like crazy. That's typically what I get. I'm like,
and I do
I'm a
enjoy
basic Becky when it comes to beer.
and we wouldn't brew them if we didn't love them as well. But we also recognize that it's what people want and what people sell, what people order, right? A beer like First Frost for forever, a beer that Ava. These are beers that are true to our psyche and are kind of close to our heart, and they mean something for me personally. Like I have family experiences of going and foraging persimmon with my kids as they've grown up. My daughter has a gecko named Persimmon. I mean, as an example, right? And so I know it's not going to sell as well. Even if it has a good food award, it's not going to sell as well as the next hazy IPA. And we're in this interesting balance of doing things that are close to our heart, but also things that the market wants. And I think a lot about what actually is innovation. What's more innovative, brewing a super juicy hazy IPA or brewing a sweet potato lager for the past 10 years that doesn't have any pumpkin pie spices and just tastes like a good lager that happens to use local ingredients?
The Carver.
Yeah. Thanks for knowing that. Which of those is more innovative? And, it's almost a rhetorical question because it's not I have my answer, but I don't know if the market agrees with me on that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you're in
maybe
this kind of funny balance of who do you pay attention to? Your own passion or what the market wants?
Well, I think the best of it, I mean, you find a balance. And it seems like you have. Like, you make the stuff that is close to your heart, but you also make the stuff that it's not to say that it's not close to your heart, but you make stuff that's more appealing to masses, that's more a catch-all. And I think that helps keep the lights on, but also that allows you to do your passion projects.
Very true. Yeah, and
you
you're right.
have to, if you look at it, like if you're making beer and there are, generic categories of beer, then you're like, okay, we at least need to play in some of these realms. So I'm going to give you what I think this should be. So it's your hazy IPA.
Right.
And maybe you make it innovative inside of how you do it, or you don't. It doesn't matter. It's what you decided to be your version of it. It's like, people.
You guys are good.
Well,
you guys are steady because that's exactly it. Like you're both saying things that really resonate with me. In this case, with this 12.4, the hazy IPA, we can pop that open next if you'd like.
Sure, please.
The way we make it ours is by making it all local grain. And so it's still a beer that's on trend and it's what people want. And whether they know or not that it's made with local grain, whether that makes a difference or not, we know that it fits with our mission of contributing to the local beer economy, to helping farmers by buying local grain and making this beer.
And that's your innovation. Like, beyond anything, because back to your topic about innovation. And just by the way, before we talk about innovation, this beer is absolutely delicious.
This is the Ava?
It's crazy.
I mean, I want some more.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
That's your innovation, right? Because the on trend thing with beer, and it's just blown out of proportion. It's kind of similar in the wine world. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It just sometimes matters if it's different or like poppy in terms of blowing up your imagination to think of different. It doesn't necessarily matter if there's a basis or a quality to it. Yeah. It's almost sometimes, what's the newest, best, different thing?
Go back to what Adam Eckhart of Crank Arm said when we had he and Chris Powers of Trophy on, when he just said, and it's many have said before, but everyone's favorite flavor is new.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's okay, I guess, but it also is a little short-sighted because there are delicious, no matter what you're talking about, whether it's beer or wine or a chicken sandwich, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a different version or a new version. It just has to be fundamentally great. And if you can fundamentally do what you do well, then the cream rises in a sense. I just do what you want to do, but do it as goddamn good as you can. And then if you happen to also decide to make some crazy bit, like you're like, let's throw some basil in a beer, and why not? It's like no one was really doing that, and really not that many people are doing that even since. Like, I think maybe because you just defined it, you just put out an awesome basil beer. It's like, well, that's Fullsteam's. Like, if somebody else did it, then you're like, oh, so you just basically copied Fullsteam?
Oh no, we would never want that. And we, the more we can, the more basil, sweet potato, whatever, local grain beers. I mean, then we're proving out this economy. The thing that we talk about is that if it were just us working with local Southern ingredients, we would be like, it would be a Southern beer business, right? But we're trying to build a Southern beer economy. And I remember a year or so ago being at, it was actually a Pig Pounder in Greensboro.
Marty Cotis.
Yeah, and they were brewing with foraged spice bush, and I was like, okay, so here's an English themed brewery brewing in Greensboro, brewing with foraged spice bush. I was like, cool, like it's catching on.
Yeah.
Like this, we're not the hipster weirdos anymore. Like either that or we're all hipster weirdos.
Well, how does that? You're opening the hazy IPA because we've been talking about it long enough, and now we have to drink it. But while you're pouring it, let me ask. What is your opinion of taking Fullsteam or any brewery from North Carolina to a bigger market and crossing state lines? And I assume, and forgive me if I've not done my research properly, I assume you can get Fullsteam maybe in some neighboring states, but I don't believe it's a nationally distributed beer.
Yeah, we're in the Carolinas, Virginia, and Alabama.
Okay, yeah. So do you have desire to go national? What would be why you wouldn't? And also, I guess, capacity and building.
We're at capacity right now. So we brew 9,000 barrels. I used to say that we're the median craft brewer, but as more and more breweries open up on the small end, and you know a thing or two about that.
Sure. Now you're almost big because there's so many
we
small.
are, yeah. It's weird. Like, how did that happen? It's not that we grew that large. We grew incrementally over the past decade. But
a good amount. I mean, considering, like, whatever, not to show hands too much, but like Hill, super tiny and with a very small system. They have this 7-barrel system. They're making 30 to 40 barrels a month. So you're making 9,000 in a year. So putting that in perspective,
double the size of Hill, essentially. A little bit more than double.
I think more than that.
That
but
math doesn't work out. I just said
40 barrels a month. That's 400 a year. That's 480 a year.
Yeah.
And you're right. That doesn't work
That would
out
be
at all.
900.
No, yeah.
That's all right.
You're almost you're more than 10 times.
Good math, Matt. No, so to give perspective, you're putting out a fair amount,
a decent amount, but nowhere near like the.
If you're
2
going to be Sierra
million,
Nevada, let's say
a million of Sierra Nevada, 2 million of Boston Beer Company. We're not a diversified beverage company. I mean, we're still a brewery. We're in that awkward middle, for
it's
sure.
It's weird when you talk about numbers and perception as well. I worked for a Jackson family, which is Kendall Jackson, for 4 years, and everyone knows Kendall Jackson, KJ Chardonnay. It's everywhere. KJ, as a company, makes 4 million cases of wine. At least they did when I worked there 7 years ago. But they made 4 million. I imagine it's bigger now. But to put in perspective, Yellowtail made like 15 or 16 million cases at that time, and all the other bigger brands like the Constellations and the Fosters were making like 30 million cases to KJ's. It's just KJ is just really well received in the market and like does a good job of marketing and has a very loyal fan base to where you just think, oh, they're massive. It's like, they're big, but they're nowhere near massive when you come to the same level, like a Budweiser would be in this perspective.
Yeah, I think for Fullsteam, there's maybe an impression that we're larger than we really are. We talk about being in 4 states, but really the vast majority of our 9,000 barrels we sell here in the Triangle area. A little bit across the state with a great distributor, Tryon Distributing. Very little in other states. And to get back to your question of like, where are we going? What are our aspirations with all of that? We recognize that there's the power of local, and that we want. And I want, whenever I go out, I'm supporting that local brewery where I travel and visit. And it's a tough thing to compete against. We're in Alabama, but there's also a great beer scene in Alabama. There's great breweries in Alabama, and Alabamians are going to support their local brewery. And so that's just the nature of having 8,000, 9,000, whatever it is, breweries nationwide. And so we're smartly, I think, kind of reining it in, and because we're at capacity, we're really focusing on serving the local community, and that means a few less trips and kind of spreading the Fullsteam word kind of throughout the Southeast and maybe up to New York for the occasional jaunt and all that, and really kind of focusing on the local market. But that's our origins. That's the place I know. That's the place I've been since I worked at Magnolia Grill in 1992. Like, this is home. So we're considering our next steps. We are at capacity, and we have to decide where we're taking it. Are we going to make that next big leap and build our capacity and then try to serve a broader market? I think that's a logical extension, but that's a big capital infusion and a lot of risk. It feels even riskier than starting up a small brewery a decade ago.
Sure.
So the one thing that I've learned about myself is that I'm actually pretty cautious. We started this whole conversation talking about taking the leap and being entrepreneurial and all of that. That was a big leap, but I feel like I'm kind of been on the tiptoes of another leap and just watching and very mindful of a changing market, of a broader acceptance of the things that we do, and a lot of competition. And I don't want to screw it up. I can't screw it up. This is what I'm doing. This is my life.
But it seems to me like you're always the person that's kind of got the eye on the cusp of what is happening. Like, you were in the forefront of Pop the Cap. So
Well, thanks.
It would be interesting, though. By the way, this hazy IPA is delicious.
Yeah, it is.
And again, like I think I kidded around the first time you were on at Terra Vita. I said I was embarrassed to. I tried to order like heady beers when I went to Fullsteam because you were standing right behind me. I was like, "Oh, give me a farmhouse ale or whatever is aged." Blah, blah. And Felicia goes, "Just get the IPA. You know, you like the IPA." I'm like, "Stop saying that. I don't want Sean to think I'm so basic." But this is awesome. This is delicious.
There's nothing basic. It's just beer. We all like.
Yeah,
like
it's so stupid to even
so
think
silly.
that I'm stupid. Yeah.
Well, I just want to get back to that conversation for a minute because we talked about Chardonnay for a second and the word, the parallel and the innovation. And this is, I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute because if you try to understand the market to 100%, you'll drive yourself crazy because you never can, because people are out there and there's this whole backlash about Chardonnay or oaky Chardonnay. But if you think about it, our symbols, our touch point of Chardonnay at its most prolific level is oak the shit out of. If you drink Merceau, if you drink Chassagne Montrachet or Batard Montrachet, those are 100% new oak all the time. But why is it great? Because the farming is great. The land is great for those. So that terroir and that fruit lends itself to a lot of oak. So the wine is harmonious with the oak. And so when you have that makes a beautiful wine that nobody can deny. You can say you don't like that. Okay, fine. But you cannot categorically deny the quality of that.
Well, you can have like Kistler Chardonnay in Sonoma, a totally different area, oaked the fuck out of it as well, but like Nomala and like great winemaking technique. And it's not Burgundy, but it's awesome. It's its own thing.
Absolutely.
It's just the best of its version.
It's the best of its version. And I haven't looked at exact numbers, but I'm in the wine business, and I know that Chardonnay is still wildly popular across the universe. Yeah. And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason that it's also still one of the most noble and highly planted grapes in the entire world. There's got to be somebody drinking that. So, and then
it also is easy as hell to grow. Like farmers will say it's the easiest grape to grow, and Pinot is the most difficult typically. Yes. So it's like in grand sweeping things. So is it also just because it's ubiquitous that we keep pushing it down everyone's throats, and it just happens to be that we have built a flavor for it? Like potatoes are the most grown vegetable in the country, but that's because we like French fries. So like what came first?
Here's the most ironic thing about Chardonnay is that if you talk to some people, it is a non-aromatic grape profile. Right. So it doesn't really have like bursting out flavors and aromatics. It's really about how the technique and how it's made and cultivated.
And that's what makes it great regionally, right?
And that's what makes it great regional.
Of its region.
Exactly. And I think that if you'd ask any winemaker that's really like classically trained or even, aware of historical winemaking, their mark, and one of their marks is always to make a great Pinot Noir and great Chardonnay. I would say, I would guess that if you asked most winemakers worth their salt, they would say that. But the whole conundrum of this, then I get back to, and I wanted to say this in the Weddington episode, is that you have this out there, right? And you have this trying to figure out the market. And then when I always think this is like what ripped out my soul in terms of beverages. And sorry to out my brother on this, but him and his family came to visit. They do, every year. And so
for Thanksgiving.
So I got a bunch of really good wine, and they love to drink gin and tonic. So I not for Thanksgiving. This was before Thanksgiving. This was over the summer. And so I got they really liked Bombay Sapphire. Like they've done it. They've done blind tasting. That's their choice of gin. Sure. So I got a big bottle of Bombay Sapphire, and then I was like, all right, what do you guys want to drink? And I looked in the fridge, and they had gone shopping that day. And what do you think was in the fridge?
Tell me it wasn't a Truly.
Pretty close.
Or
it was
Claw.
A big thing of White Claw that they had bought. And he's like, no, I'll just take the White Claw. And I was like,
are they in cardboard containers now, like box wine, like box seltzer? It's getting to that point.
It probably will be. But I'm fine with that whole container thing because that actually makes a lot of sense. But it's the actual taste of, to get on the White Claw.
I've jumped on the bandwagon of LaCroix and that ilk of, I love sodas, but drinking a Pepsi every single day is probably not good for your health. And so drinking just carbonated something, also just having straight carbonated water is boring. And so having a LaCroix is kind of cool because it's got a flavor to it. It does say natural ingredients, which I still am very hesitant about because you don't know what the hell that means. But there's no calories, there's no sugars, there's whatever, and there's some flavors so we can get through. So it only makes sense that we'd also want to put alcohol in that same thing because that's what we do. We're like, whatever we can do.
It's called champagne and Prosecco and Cava.
Yeah, but champagne is
Or
super
beer.
expensive, and I think it's because White Claw is so damn accessible and easy, and that one kid on YouTube made it really funny. So, because of that, that's how we love it.
But it does seem like we're a nation of extremes. I mean, here we are drinking this 12-4, the hazy IPA, which is it's a double IPA. It's at like 9% alcohol. It's big. It's crazy. And then basically the same, let's call it a long sentence, we get to White Claw, right?
Right.
And we are this nation of extremes where it's just like big, boozy, crazy IPA. And then, alcoholic seltzer.
That's only 7% alcohol, so I can drink a lot of them.
Yeah, maybe less. I think I would hope less. 7%?
I think it's 7%.
That's like the Four Loko version, dude.
There's a...
but I mean, like the two extremes, and like that just, to me, this conversation kind of epitomizes America, right? It's just got to be like crazy niche, heady, hazy IPAs, and then screw it all, I'm doing a seltzer, right? And like all we're trying to do for the last 10 years at Fullsteam is be dependable and good and like delicious, right? And so we talk about beers always in the fridge. Like our beer that I always want in the fridge is like Paycheck Pilsner, Rocket Science IPA, Humidity Pale Ale made with triticale, grown in eastern North Carolina. Like these are beers that they're not the extremes. They're just dependable go-tos. And my years in F&B, I know that that's what chefs drink if they're drinking, right? They're often just popping open a Pilsner at the end of a long shift. They're not drinking the fun things that have a lot to talk about and a lot of story and all of that.
I might take you to task on Ben Barker when you worked at Magnolia Grill, popping a Pilsner at the end of a shift.
Why?
I've just I've gotten to know him, and his wine knowledge is pretty impressive. And so, but maybe back in those days, he was just
Bill
popping
Smith
Pilsner.
is popping Pabst PBRs.
That's a good
all
point.
day long.
But, but I guess but I agree. Most chefs, they just want the Pilsner.
Yeah, well, his favorite, Ben's favorite beer was the Red Tail, Mendocino's Red Tail. I remember that was on the menu back in the day, and one of his favorites.
Oh, I love that beer.
It's a good
North
beer.
Coast, right?
Yeah. And it's just one of those like dependable and now gone beers, but it was a mainstay of the menu and one of his personal favorites. Regardless of whether the beverage of choice is something thirst quenching that's wine, vermouth, spirits, or beer. I mean, we're all here because we're equal opportunity imbibers, right?
Yes.
And like I think for us with beer, we just I'm a little tired of all the noise and all the ratings and all the seeking versus enjoying the moment. And I think, now we're 10 years in and I think a lot about beer with a sense of place. And the sense of place for a Paycheck Pilsner is just grab it from the fridge and like you might not give it that much thought because there's other things to think about and do. Yeah. And like that's okay. That's like perfectly fine. It's a beer for the background, right? Ava is not a beer for the background. That's a beer you want to talk about and kind of discuss and think about and like, ooh, what are you getting this and that? And that's okay too, right? But one doesn't make the other better or worse. Like beer, we shouldn't forget beer's roots. Again, getting back to the Pop the Cap origin, the reason that the 6% law existed in the first place was because it was the beverage of the working class, the beverage of the common person, and we fetishize this thing so much that we've forgotten that this should be a beverage for everyday enjoyment, right? And it's hard to stay current in a very crowded marketplace with that message. Like that's not a very PR friendly kind of like hook,
right?
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah,
like, I'm okay. Like. I don't need the hook. Like I just want you to think about buying a beer made with local ingredients, local grain that's available at your fine independent retailers,
but also
at Harris Teeter.
Yeah. When you talk about local sourcing, I know that for a lot of brewers in general in North Carolina, the fact of trying to find certain sources in itself was just a challenge for so many years. So are you finding local malt and local hops and local barley? Or
yeah, so basically two of the three things are interchangeable there, like local barley, local malted barley. So locally farmed barley that's malted in North Carolina? Yes, right? And so there's 3 maltsters in North Carolina: Carolina Malt House, Riverbend Craft Malt, and Epiphany Craft Malt.
That's right.
And we buy from all 3 of those. Hops are tough.
Yeah, hops just by nature they only really thrive in certain regions.
That's right.
Similar to like certain wine growing styles or so. And it's funny, most hops grow where marijuana grows.
Well, they're related. They're
They are.
cousins. Yeah.
So like you go Humboldt, you're going to find some great pot, but you're also going to find some great hops.
So I've heard. And so we have to recognize that hops aren't going to be a big driver of the local beer economy. You can get fresh hops during hop harvest season and add it as a sort of one-off for fun, but it's not particularly scalable. But do you know how much in our 9 years, how much we've purchased in local ag ingredients? Did you see that on our website, or do you know?
No.
Tell us.
It's $500,000.
Wow.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool.
That's amazing.
$500,000 of cumulative local ag purchasing since we started. I will sleep better at night when we have that. If we were to get that amount every year, then I'll realize the goal. I'll realize the vision.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, screw all innovation, screw all niche marketing. The fact of what you're doing, like you saying, in not only helping to create but stimulate this Southern beer economy is your calling card, and that is your innovation.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat about it with you because, frankly, not enough people care.
Right.
People don't care. Like, not enough.
No.
You know?
Yeah, somebody's drinking White Claw right now. How dare you? Put that White Claw down.
And it is a fine balance between drink what you like and also drink with a beverage that supports your local farmer. Right? Because tobacco ain't cutting it anymore. And if we want to support our local farm, we do it by buying from farmers markets, by going to restaurants that buy from local farmers, by growing our own, buying directly from the farmer, but also through beverages that celebrate the local agricultural traditions of North Carolina. Yeah. How do we get people to care? It's through conversations like this. It's like basically one person at a time who's like, oh, I didn't know that Fullsteam does that. Because like when you go to Fullsteam for trivia night on Thursday night, drinking a rocket science, you don't know that that's what we do.
Right.
We're in downtown Durham. It doesn't it doesn't scream local ag, but we try to live it out and challenge ourselves, and then really through conversations like this, just one story at a time, talking about this passion for local. That's
exactly what we're trying to do. If you're ever trying to figure out where to eat and what to drink, what to purchase, well, just look at the list of people that have been on our show over the last 201 episodes. Those are the people you should be going to, whether it's Ashley's Restaurants or Cheedy or Matt Kelly or whomever, like all these like great little one-off little startups out here. I think it's funny, previous guest of the show, and she and I did a whole podcast together, Candace Townsend. She said, and I love this quote, she's like, at this point, if you're not shopping local, you're a dick. And I laughed at it, and we laughed, but it's like, she's like, it's almost harder to not shop local. Like, you have to intentionally get out of your way to call and be like, no, I want the Indonesian shrimp. That's what I want. Like, just be aware, use your local community. It actually technically is almost easier for you to shop local.
I want that pig feces tilapia.
Yeah, right? Oh, it's so delicious. I know it's not good for me, but it's got that great aftertaste.
Okay, cut that part.
Well, before you get out of here, we talked about it quickly before. Proof Alcohol Ice Cream is one of our fantastic sponsors. They have provided us with ice cream that melds alcohol.
Talk about innovation.
Serious, yeah.
How do they do it?
She won't tell you. Jennifer Randall says that is a secret under lock and key until all of those things have probably been worked out with patents and all. That no one gets to know. But it does happen. And here at the kitchen, we have a Proof Alcohol Ice Cream freezer full of delicious flavors like the apple pie moonshine, the bourbon caramel, the coconut rum. There's so many different ones. So before you leave, Sean, grab yourself a pint, take it back to Fullsteam. Let them know, like what Matt Kelly did. He blew us away. He just took a scoop of it and dropped it in his coffee and said, there you go. I'm good.
Nice.
Matt, what else you got?
Well, we've made it pretty clear. Now you can not only have to shop local, but you can do your part by just buying from a brewery that uses local ingredients like Fullsteam. So for all of you out there, eat local, drink local. Go to Fullsteam in Durham, and you will eat and drink very merrily.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes, and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.